Most of you, all I imagine, will be familiar with this. This was composed by Scott Joplin, one of the most famous ragtime piano composers. He was not actually famous until much of his work was redone in the 60s. But what was unique about him was he wrote his music down in the traditional European classical form. Whereas most ragtime piano composers would play from memory, would improvise, or would scribble it down in form more like this. Just one piece of music, one page for each song, with here the chords. The names are basically guidelines for what you're supposed to play. And then written here is usually just a basic melody. The melody being the top line. And the chords, having written, will be the guidelines for you having to fill them in. So, Scott Joplin put these together and published it as sheet music for pianists that could read in the European form, which at the time were the paying customers were mostly white. So this music kind of bridged the gap between the ragtime that we know to have been popular in the brothels and the clubs and some of the juke joints and the lower class establishments. And it allowed that music to become popular for more audiences and more widely available. So this is The Entertainer by Scott Joplin. Around the turn of the century, into the early 1910s, 1920s, and very early 1930s, ragtime spread across the country, and each city, north and south, had their own unique style and form that they applied to the songs, the classic songs, and the original songs that they would write. One of the most famous forms came from the South, but really developed most strongly in New York City, and this was stride piano. We have Fats Waller and Art Tatum as some of the examples of fantastic stride players that came out of Harlem in the early century, and their style combined more of the blues and the gospel than ragtime did. Ragtime had blues, gospel, and the elements of European traditional marches and American marches, namely influenced by John Philip Sousa. But stride piano was much truer to the ragtime, the blues and the spiritual and the gospel roots. So here's a song called Gravy Waltz.